My name is Troy. I am the pastor of worship here at the table, and it is an honor to sing and to worship with you all today. And it is really exciting for me to get to continue our message series in this Lent season, where we are walking through what we're calling Unchained. Why don't you say that with me? Unchained. Unchained, yeah, where we're learning how to live truly free. Not just on the surface level. I don't want just a faith that is, check the item off my list. I don't want to just come in to church on a Sunday and put my tithe in the box and say I did it. But no, I want to live a faith that is truly free, that transforms my life and the life of the people around me. And so that's what we're talking about here as we walk through the book of Exodus in the Bible, the journey of the Israelites out of slavery in Egypt and into freedom and into the promised land. But it was a journey. And it was a lot of work, and it was difficult for them. And so we're learning how to become truly free in this series. And today we're looking at a mountaintop experience. One of those moments in your life where you feel like you were on top of the world, things were going great, you encountered God in a different way. And that's what happens for the Israelites today, their mountaintop experience in Exodus chapter 19. If you have a Bible or want to follow along. And as we think about mountaintop experiences, I think about the tallest mountain in the world. Of course, we know Mount Everest sits at 29,000 feet. And the first time it was successfully scaled, at least on record, was by Sir Edmund Hillary and Tenzing Norgay. And they accomplished that feat, reaching the summit on May 29th of 1953. I thought it was much earlier than that, but no, it's only 53. And since then, nearly 7,300 people have made that journey successfully as well. Now, that sounds like a lot, but consider many, many more have attempted it, and there are like 8 billion people on the planet. Raise your hand if you ever scaled Mount Everest. Not a single hand online went up. Put it in the comment section if you ever have. No, we haven't. Because it's not just as easy as, I climbed a mountain today. We're talking months, if not years, of training and preparation. You need the right gear. You need a team, right? You don't just wake up one day and go, I'm going to climb Mount Everest. It takes preparation. And I'm learning that in my experience of following Jesus now for over 20 years, it's very similar. It's very similar. There are some days when it feels like even following the Lord, it can feel like I have to climb 30,000 feet. Anyone else? It's not easy. It takes training, it takes preparation, because if I want to go higher and I want more of the Lord and I want true, deep freedom, it's going to take some preparation. And so that's what we're looking at today. So let's turn together to Exodus chapter 19. It's going to be on the screen again, so follow along. Exactly 2 months after the Israelites left Egypt, they arrived in the wilderness of Sinai. After breaking camp at Rephidim, they came to the wilderness of Sinai and set up camp there at the base of Mount Sinai. Moses climbed the mountain to appear before God. The Lord called to him from the mountain and said, "Give these instructions to the family of Jacob. Announce it to the descendants of Israel. You have seen what I did to the Egyptians. You know how I carried you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. Now, if you will obey me and keep my covenant, you will be my own special treasure from among all the peoples of the earth. For all the earth belongs to me, and you will be my kingdom of priests, my holy nation. This is the message you must give the people of Israel." Now, while scholars and archaeologists don't all agree on where this happened, all of the Abrahamic faiths all agree that this is the most significant moment, or one of the most significant moments in all of history, all of religious history. It's here at Mount Sinai where God gives Moses the 10 Commandments. It's where God gives the instructions for the priesthood and lays out the blueprint for the tabernacle, the portable version of the temple that would be built hundreds of years later. This is a pivotal moment. Really, what God is doing is giving the Israelites their national constitution. He's saying, this is who you are and how you're going to live. But before he gives them this constitution, he sort of gives them this preamble, if you will, where he establishes their national identity. Their identity comes before the Constitution. God says here in these verses who he is. He reminds them of what he just did for them 2 months earlier and says, now as a result, this is who you get to be as my people. God reminds them that he saved them. He delivered them from slavery. He reached out with a mighty hand, with signs and wonders to deliver them. He flexed his might and power against the gods and the ruler of Egypt. And he made a way through the Red Sea. And he did it all to bring these people to himself. And so as we talk about what it means to truly live free in this series, I wanted us to remember today that who God is and what he's done for us precedes who we are and what we do for him. God comes first. God's the one who initiates. He's the one who saves. He's the one who calls us. God gives us the new identity, and then we get to respond with worship and faith and obedience. It's exactly what Moses hears from the Lord at Sinai. God says, look, you saw what I did. It was me. And now you get to respond to me and become my people. Listen to those words again in verse 5 and 6. Now, if you will obey me and keep my covenant, you will be my special treasure from among all the peoples on earth. For all the earth belongs to me. And you will be my kingdom of priests, my holy nation. This is the message you must give the people of Israel. Now think about that for a moment. It struck me this week as I was studying and preparing. God is speaking to the nation of Israel. These were people, men and women, who were slaves for 400 years. All they knew for generations was back-breaking labor. They knew oppression and unfair circumstances. That's all they knew. It's who they became. All they knew was slavery. And yet God says, I want you to be my nation of priests. Is that not absurd? Like, honestly, think about that for a second. You would never ask me to become the CEO of Apple. You would never do it. And yet God is saying, hey, you group of slaves, I want you to be my priests. I mean, what makes them qualified to serve as priests? Nothing. And that's the point, church. Nothing qualifies these people to be God's priests. But they get to go from building temples and monuments to the Egyptian gods to now serving as priests of God of the universe. They go from under the tyranny and oppression of Pharaoh to now becoming a nation of kings and queens. It's incredible transformation. This is their new identity, and it comes first. And the same is true for us. Listen to what the Apostle Peter says. He was one of Jesus' closest followers and friends and one of the founders of the Christian church. He says, but you are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's special possession. He is quoting Exodus 19. Why? So that you may declare the praises of him who called you out of darkness into his wonderful light. Now, contrary to the popular view, God did not change from the Old Testament to the New Testament. He's the same. God still saves. God still initiates. We still get to respond. And keeping the covenant, the agreement, is still required. But in the New Testament, the difference is that all of it rests on Jesus Christ. Hear me. It is through Jesus' death on a cross, his resurrection from the dead, and his perfect obedience and keeping the law, through which we then get to become God's holy people, a royal priesthood, his treasured possession. By faith in Jesus Christ alone, God's invitation to the people of Israel to become royal priests is fulfilled in us. Those who have placed their faith and hope in Jesus' perfect work are royal priests now, a holy nation now, to the glory of God for the purpose of declaring his praise to the world. Listen to what Jesus himself says in John chapter 8, verse 34 to 36. He says, everyone who sins is say this next word, slave to sin. Now the slave has no permanent place in the family, but a son belongs to it forever. So if the Son sets you free, you will be, or you are free what? Indeed. This is your identity. This is my identity, the church's identity now, not someday. You are free now. You are his now. You have access to God's presence and his power and purpose for your life right now. You don't have to wait for it when you die and go to heaven someday. It's yours. The Israelites were enslaved for 400 years until God rescued them and pulled them out. And you and I are no longer slaves to sin or shame or brokenness or the labels of our past. We are God's treasured possession now as his royal priesthood and holy nation, which means this: true freedom is knowing who you are in Christ. That's it. I heard this story. Now, it's a good preacher story, so I don't know how true it is, but we tell true stories as preachers. But I heard that there are certain elephant trainers in parts of the world who will train baby elephants to stay on their leash by actually leashing them to a tree that's just big enough that a baby elephant can't pull it out. And so early on in their life, this elephant is leashed to this tree. And eventually, after enough attempts at trying to break free, the baby elephant kind of gives up and settles in and gets comfortable. But then you fast forward by a couple months or years when that baby elephant grows to become the largest land animal on earth. They could easily snap that tree out of the ground and pull off of their rope. But because they were conditioned early on to not even try, they don't realize that they have the strength. They don't realize who they are, or that they are already free if all they do is walk. And I think for those of us following Jesus at least, the catalyst for our deepest struggles and pain and our sin is what I call spiritual amnesia. We wake up and we forget who we are in Jesus Christ. We forget just what he did for us. We forget how much God loves us and that we are free. We believe the lies of the world that says that we're never going to be enough. We believe the lies from our past that say we're too messed up. And so we simply get pulled back into our old way of being, even though, like that elephant, we are free if we would simply take a step forward in faith. We are free. But all of us have those things that keep us hung up, don't we? We have areas of our lives where we feel enslaved, we feel hopeless. Maybe it's an addiction or a habit that you just can't seem to break no matter how hard you try. Maybe it's a secret sin that you keep falling into, shame and guilt. Maybe it's a fear that's paralyzing you from stepping into what God has for you. All of us have something. And it doesn't matter how many books you read or podcasts you listen to, no matter how hard you try, you keep getting sucked back in. But the paradox of our faith is that true freedom comes not by our own effort. Freedom comes by trusting and surrendering. It comes, church, when we align our lives, how we live, and what we believe about ourselves with what God has already done and who he says we already are in Jesus Christ. See, when we embrace that, we start parenting not from a reliance on our own strength and our own wisdom, but we parent from full dependence on him. We don't handle our money thinking we have to hold on to it and squirrel it away for a rainy day. No, we get to live generously to bless other people. Instead of escaping to empty vices, we run into God's arms and his presence because we are free. We don't have to prove ourselves. Say this, say, I am free now. Do you believe it? 3 people in here believe it. That's all right. I got work to do. It's okay. We'll just invite the 11:15 to come in and we'll just all do it together until we get it. Let's go back to Exodus chapter 19, though, starting in verse 9. The Lord said to Moses, I will come to you in a thick cloud, Moses, so that the people themselves can hear me when I speak to you. Then they will always trust you. Pause. Is there enough evidence that you've been spending time with the Lord, that he speaks to you, that people actually trust you? Just a little something to think about. Moses told the Lord what the people had said, which earlier they said, yeah, we'll do everything that God says. Spoiler, they don't. Then the Lord said to Moses, go down and prepare the people for my arrival. Consecrate them today and tomorrow and have them wash their clothing. Be sure they are ready on the 3rd day, for on that day the Lord will come down on Mount Sinai as all the people watch. Mark off a boundary all around the mountain. Warn the people, be careful, do not go up on the mountain or even touch its boundaries. Anyone who touches the mountain will certainly be put to death. No hand may touch the person or animal that crosses the boundary. Instead, stone them or shoot them with arrows. Okay? They must be put to death. However, when the ram's horn sounds a long blast, then the people may go up on the mountain. Moses went down to the people. He consecrated them. Say that word, consecrated. He consecrated them for worship, and they washed their clothing. He told them, get ready for the 3rd day. And until then, abstain from having sexual intercourse. This is the translation that I went with, and that's how they translated it. That got weird really quickly, didn't it? Not what you expected to hear in worship. I thought the people had access, right? Come on into the presence of God. You're free. I have a new identity. I thought God was a God of mercy and grace and stuff, right? Well, all of that is still true. They do have a new identity. God is still a God of mercy and grace. But here's the catch. With this new identity comes greater access to God's presence and his power and his purpose. But how many of you know you can pass your driver's exam, get your ID, get your driver's license, have the keys, open the car, but if it doesn't have any gas, you're not getting very far, are you? See, access is one thing, but actually living out and experiencing the power of something is different, and it takes a different level of preparation. And that's where this idea of consecration comes in. See, the Lord brought the Israelites out of Egypt so that they might become a holy nation that reveals his glory to the world. But for the people to fulfill that calling, they needed to consecrate themselves. So raise your hand here if you had a relative or grew up in a home that had like a special couch or a chair or like the nice living room. Anybody? Yeah, I'm talking about the couch that was always covered in plastic. You couldn't sit on it. I would go to my grandparents' house, and it was the room in the back. Like, you couldn't sit on it. It was crunchy and wrinkly, and like when they weren't paying attention, I would try to get in there and sit on it, and like I did something naughty, you know what I mean? Why? Because that piece of furniture was being protected. It had a special purpose. That was for the special company, right? Like the VIPs. Just in case the president were to come over to your grandparents' house, that was the couch that they were going to sit on. That couch was consecrated. It was set apart for a purpose, for a special person, and it was protected. And that is what it means to be set apart as the people of God. Consecrating yourself means setting yourself apart and keeping yourself pure for the special purpose of, listen, knowing, worshiping, and magnifying God in a deeper way. And it's not just about not sinning. Like, I didn't cuss this week. No, it's about sometimes setting aside good things so that you can be prepared to receive the greater thing God has for you up on the mountain. Let me put it this way. Consecration is preparation for God's work in and through us. And we see it in the passage that we just read. Moses has the people wash their clothes. There's nothing wrong with wearing clothes in the presence of God. But the problem was that these were people who had been walking through the desert for 2 months. They were former slaves. They had stuff on them that just simply didn't belong in God's presence on the mountain. So wash their clothing. Not saying you have to come to church having taken a fresh shower and done the laundry, but it's a reflection of the state of your heart. Same thing, like, again, awkwardly read earlier. There's nothing wrong with having sex with your spouse. Sorry, kids, close your ears. There's nothing wrong with it, right? Like, God designed it. It's good. A lot of people have it. But that's the point. God's saying, can you set aside something good that I designed that involves your body? Can you set that aside and be prepared to enter my presence in a different way? And so for us, that's consecration. Are we setting aside good things to make way for the better thing God has for us? I'm grateful. Look, we don't have to prove ourselves to get into God's presence. We don't have to earn our own freedom, but I don't want just a surface level faith. I want more. I want deeper. I want God to do a deeper work in me and through me, and it requires consecration. And God wants the same thing for me. So let's keep going. Verse 16. On the morning of the third day, thunder roared and lightning flashed, and Garth Brooks wrote a song about it. I'm glad you laughed. Thank you. It's because you beat your alarm clock this morning. And a dense cloud came down on the mountain. There was a long, loud blast from a ram's horn, and all the people trembled. Moses led them out of the camp to meet with God, and they stood at the foot of the mountain. All of Mount Sinai was covered with smoke because the Lord had descended on it in the form of fire. The smoke billowed into the sky like smoke from a brick kiln. The whole mountain shook violently. As the blast of the ram's horn grew louder and louder, Moses spoke, and God thundered his reply. The Lord came down on top of Mount Sinai and called Moses to the top of the mountain. So Moses climbed the mountain. Then the Lord told Moses, "Go back down and warn the people not to break through the boundaries to see the Lord, or they will die. Even the priests who regularly come near to the Lord must purify themselves so that the Lord does not break out and destroy them." I'm going to pause there. We're going to stop there. How incredible must that have been to be the Israelites at Mount Sinai? Smoke and fire and lightning falling. We would describe this as the glory of the Lord. Say glory. Glory. Say glory. 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 The glory of the Lord. Now, the original Hebrew word for glory means weight. It means weight. God's glory is heavy. It's God's glory that moves things. It's God's glory that parts seas and lets people walk on dry ground. It's God's glory that shakes mountains. It's God's glory that breaks chains. It's God's glory that calls us into his presence. It's God's glory that holds the universe in his hand by his word. God's glory is powerful. But if we are not consecrated, and if we try to do things in our own timing, we will get crushed under the weight of God's glory. We cannot withstand it. And so God is not telling the people, stay away because he's some angry deity who wants to strike them with a lightning bolt. God gives us laws and commandments and boundaries so that we at the right time can become consecrated, set apart, and holy to enter his presence. He's protecting us, because he knows otherwise the weight will crush us. When I was in high school, I was a sophomore. Now, I was not always the fit physical specimen that I am today. And so sophomore in high school, we were in gym class, and we would one day be playing basketball, and then the next we would go into the weight room where the football team worked out. And I'd never worked out at this point, okay? So I was just 115, 120 pounds soaking wet, and I'm in the weight room, and there's one kid, he's on the JV football team. He's like, hey, Troy, come over here. Let me show you the decline bench press. Jump on this thing. And so I lay back, if you've ever done this, I lay back, and I lay down, put my arms up, and he stacks a 35-pound weight on each side. That's 115 pounds total, including the bar. Now, that's not that much, but again, I weighed about that much in 10th grade. So I lay down, and he helps me unrack it. I'm like, okay, here we go. And then he walks away. My man, if you are watching this online, he walked away. And so here I am, and my arms start shaking, and I was not prepared for the weight in my arms. And so what happened? The weight came crashing down on the bridge of my nose. I screamed, I yelled. The gym teacher comes rushing in. Some other students do as well, and they help lift the bar off. And I'm like, my face is red. I spent the rest of gym class with an ice pack on my face, and my friend spent the rest of it getting chewed out by the gym teacher. Because you don't leave your lifting partner. Because you gotta be prepared for the weight that's put on you. And if we are so busy trying to live with one foot in the world and one foot in the church, we will not be able to withstand the weight of the glory of God that He wants to pour on us. And so today, you're thinking about something in your life, an area, I don't know what it is, but you're thinking about something where you feel helpless and you feel enslaved. You feel like there's never going to be a change. It's never going to work out. You're going to keep struggling. And I want to tell you today that God's glory and His grace can break the chains and set you free, but you need to consecrate yourself. You got to set yourself apart. Surrender it to the Lord and watch what He's going to do. And maybe you're here today and you've never placed your faith in Jesus Christ. You've never received His salvation and freedom. Today's your day. Listen to Hebrews chapter 1, verse 3. The Son, Jesus, is the radiance of God's glory and the exact representation of His being, sustaining all things by His powerful word. After He had provided purification for sins, He sat down at the right hand of the majesty in heaven. And now He invites us to His table as His royal priests and His holy nation. And now we get to respond by coming to that table. So I want to invite you to stand to your feet or in spirit. And we're going to consecrate ourselves and go before the Lord's table. Thank you, Mark. Jesus, I thank You for Your grace. I thank You that You make a way for us into Your presence and free us from captivity. Those who sin are slaves to sin, but if the Son sets you free, you are free indeed. Show us the areas where we need to be free right now, Jesus, I pray, in Your name. I thank You, Lord, that we are set free and forgiven and made right with You. And now we get to come to Your table.